Hello, everyone. Otto Excelsior here of navicavada.org. You might know me and my co-pilot and electronics warfare officer, Roger Hanson, for our automatic pilot show. We're doing a little something different today, though. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about what I like to call nuts and bolts Buddhism, Buddhism basics, something I always like to get back to. And we're going to be talking with Robert Hanson, who is the other half of the Brothers Hanson, who are responsible for some of the most amazing stuff I've ever seen on the internet. And of course, we also have Roger with us as well. Gentlemen, I'm very glad to have you with me today.
Glad to be
Welcome.
here.
Cool. Cool. Now, Robert, I'm doing this mainly because you were interested in Buddhism and you kind of wanted to know about where it came from and basically what it is, right?
Yeah, to have more of a wide variety of everything about it. The good, where did it start? The branch offs of of it.
Well, I think that I can only talk out of my own knowledge of Buddhism.
Oh yeah,
So I would be happy to talk about what I know and my own understanding. I should start by mentioning that there are a lot of different things out there called Buddhism. And we've all heard a lot of stuff called Buddhism, and yeah, it's certainly necessarily so, rightly so. But it's sort of like saying that someone is a Christian, but then you realize you have people that are Roman Catholic, Lutheran, Episcopal, Eastern Orthodox. So there's a lot of different ways to be a Christian, just like there's a lot of different ways to be a Buddhist. So, but I'm going to talk about my own Buddhism, which is based on Theravada Buddhism. And Theravada means the way of the old ones, and it is the oldest tradition that we have about the Buddha, the oldest writings we have. So this is a big question. What is Buddhism, right? And I've been thinking about this for a few days now, and I think we'll talk a little bit about who the Buddha was. Uh, the Buddha was not born the Buddha. Okay, Buddha means somebody who is awake. That's what the Buddha means. Buddha means the awake, the guy who's awake, the awakened one. Before he was the Buddha, he was just some guy. And the technical term is bodhisattva or bodhisattva, you might have heard. That's another way to say it. And that means a pre-Buddha, somebody that's going to be a Buddha down the line. So when his name was Gautama Siddhartha. And so when Gautama was born, this is the story. His father, who was a prince, a military man, he was part of the ruling military caste in India. He consulted astrologers, and you always consult an astrologer. You know, what is my son's life going to be? And the astrologer cast his horoscope, and he said, "Well, your son Gautama is either going to be a world teacher, or he's going to be a world conqueror." I think the term was Chakravartin, which means a wheel-turning monarch. In other words, he's going to be this great military and political overlord, or he's going to be this amazing spiritual teacher. Well, now his father was already a military man, and he obviously wanted his son to be a general and a conqueror and stuff. So he says, well, I'm going to addict my son to all the worldly pleasures in life. So he'll never think about that holy stuff and the spiritual teachings and stuff. So the Buddha grew up with amazing wealth, amazing luxury, right? Hot and cold running dancing girls, right? He had palaces for every season of the year. He was married to, I believe he had 4 wives. You'd have to check. Each wife had her own palace. You know, this is like really Elon Musk levels of wealth. Well, maybe not quite Elon, but yeah, very, very, very well off. And so he always grew up surrounded by wonderful food. All things were smooth for him. You know, never any lumps in the bed. His attendants were always healthy and young. The only old person he ever saw was his own father, who, although he was gray-haired, he was still a stalwart, strong guy in his early 50s or mid 50s even. And so he's like tooling along, thinking, this is great. And one day he's going out with for a chariot ride with his charioteer, and they're bopping along, and he sees this person by the side of the road, and he's like gray haired like his dad, but he's all wrinkled, right? And he can barely stand upright. He's got a stick, and he's got a younger man helping him along, and he can barely move. And the Buddha had never seen anything like this. This guy's obviously suffering. He can barely walk. So it's because of his charioteer. What happened to that guy? The charioteer, well, he got old. The Buddha said, old? The only other person with gray hair I ever saw was my dad. He's in good shape. He can beat me at arm wrestling. It's like, oh, no. This is what happens to everyone. Everybody gets old. And they get like that. And the Buddha goes, wow. He had no idea. So he's thinking about this. So he goes back to the palace. Goes out on another chariot trip. They're tooling along, and he sees somebody out in front of their house, which is what they used to do, who was very ill. And he was sitting on a shaded area, and he had his friends trying to give him medicine. He was like throwing up, and he was like cramped, and he was in like a lot of pain. The Buddha never seen anything like, like a lot of young people. He'd never had a sick day in his life, past maybe the sniffles. He was like, what's happening to that guy? Like, oh, he's sick. Now, again, the Buddha's father never allowed sick people in his son's presence. The minute anyone started getting old, they were like farmed off. They always had young servants. Everything was always happy there. So he's like, sick? What's that? It's like, oh, well, you throw up, your gut gets twisted up. If you have dysentery, you just can't stop going to the vet. All kinds of things can happen to you. It's like everybody gets sick. The Buddha's like, whoa, I didn't know that. So again, he wasn't happy about it, but he's thinking about it. Yeah, I think you guys might see where this is going already. So they go out again for a little chariot ride. They come across a funeral procession, right? They're carrying a body to go be burned. And they fall in with a procession, and there's a dead body, and they're putting it on the pyre. And Buddha says, why are they burning that guy? Oh, he's dead. Dead? What's that? Oh, you stop breathing, your heart stops, you start rotting if you don't get burnt real quick. And the Buddha had never heard of this, so he was like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. So they get back to the palace, and he's kind of worked up about this. He's going to get older, he's going to age, he's going to get sick, he's going to die, even him, even the young prince that has every wish granted, that has all this immense power. He can just wave his hand, he can have any food he wants, any woman he wants, and he can go out for a horse ride. So he's like worried about this. But then he decides he's going to go out for another chariot trip. So they go out, and they're going along the road, and there's another guy he sees by the side of the road, and this is an older man, but he's standing firm. And he has very few things. He's wearing poor robes, and he just has a staff and a little satchel, and he seems very calm, and he's just traveling along. And the Buddha says, who's that guy? He seems pretty cool. And the charioteer says, oh, well, that's an ascetic. That's a mystic. Well, what's he do? He said, well, he's decided to get beyond all the illusions of this world. And the Buddha said, that's what I want to do. So you see, the father's work to try to make his son reject a spiritual path actually brought him to the spiritual path. And this is like an old motif in folklore, folk tales. So this might be just a kind of a folk tale thing, but it gives you an idea. So the Buddha was a guy who discovered that there's a lot of very unpleasant things in the world that he was completely kept in ignorant of. And in a sense, we're sort of like that, because we are all going to age. And all of us sitting here have aged quite a bit. Me not least of all, right? And we're all going to get ill, and we've all been ill. And unfortunately, we're all going to die. And these are things that most people ignore. They live as if none of this is going to happen. So they're kind of like in the state the Buddha was in, just tooling along completely unconscious of these things. So the Buddha decided he had to do something about this. He really had to face it, look at it, and figure out how he could cope with it. And so he left home and began studying with spiritual teachers. And he eventually became the Buddha, which means the awakened one. And now there's a million things I could talk about, but I just want to say something about that title, Awakened One. Okay? Because this, in a lot of ways, is the heart of what Buddhists are trying to do, or part of it, part of the technique, right? when we live in our life, okay, you and I and everybody else we know, most of the time we're not thinking about what we're doing. We're in our heads. We're thinking about what someone said to us. We're thinking about what we said to someone else. We're thinking about something we lost. We're thinking about something we might want. We're not really here a lot of the time. So we're all kind of like going around sleepwalking. And our mind, anything that comes to us gets filtered through our mind. So if we have a mind that's depressed, everything's going to be horrible. If we have a mind that's joyous, everything's going to be joyous. Hooray, right? So it has nothing to do with what's actually going on. It has to do with your own mind. So we spend all this time thinking these thoughts and living in these thoughts. And in Buddhism, they call this a becoming, right? You take on an identity in a world of experience in your head. And again, when I talk about this, you have to say more things. What happens is, well, put it this way. The Buddha was talking about, and the Buddha was said that he taught two things, right? Suffering and the end of suffering. Because he saw all this death happening and all this sickness and aging, and he was disturbed by it. He was suffering, not in pain. You know, you stub your toe, that's pain. But you suffer when you think, damn, I should not have stubbed my toe, right? That's the mental anguish. So he, by looking, discovered that you suffer because you crave something. You crave a sandwich, right? And then you cling to the idea of having a sandwich. You cling to that, right? And if you don't have a sandwich, you're miserable because I don't have a sandwich. I'm thinking about the sandwich. Where's my sandwich? I want a bloody sandwich, right? And you don't have one. This is suffering caused by clinging to the idea of a sandwich. To get out of the suffering, you just stop clinging to the idea of a sandwich. You say, well, I don't have a sandwich, but that's okay. I don't care. And suddenly you're not suffering from it anymore, right? And even if you get the sandwich, and this is the tricky part, right? Say you're craving a sandwich, right? You're clinging to the idea of a sandwich. So you go and you make a sandwich, right? You solve the problem. Well, not really, because you eat the sandwich. Now notice, first of all, that eating the sandwich probably takes less than 5 minutes, right? You spent hours thinking about having the sandwich. Most of your time with the sandwich is spent just thinking about it. The sandwich itself, it's gone. You eat it 5 minutes and suddenly you don't have a sandwich anymore. And as time goes on, the sandwich goes away. And the next day we know what happens to the sandwich, right? We know what the sandwich has turned into. So this pleasure, this thing that you cling to, goes away. And everything we cling to goes away, including the people around us go away. So this is going to cause us to suffer if we cling to them. Now, this sometimes gets people upset about Buddhism because, and I've had this conversation with people, in order to understand why you're suffering, right? In order to understand the clinging and the craving, you have to comprehend what's going on. You have to look at your suffering very closely and see that it's there. And like I said at the beginning, most people ignore this. So one of the first things that a Buddhist does is, after, receiving precepts or undertaking to keep precepts, is you have 5 things you're supposed to think about every day. And one is the discovery of the Buddha, that you are going to age. That's normal, part of the deal. You're born, you're going to age. You're going to get sick. It's normal. It's part of the deal. You can't help it. You're going to get sick sometime or other. And yes, you are going to die. Unfortunately, we're all going to die. And that's part of the deal. You can't help that. And then the further remembrance is that you will be separated from things, from all that you hold dear, from all the things you like. They're going to go away one way or another. The sandwich is gone. Our friends will move away or they'll die. Eventually we'll die and we'll leave everything. So we will be separated from things. Of course, we'll also be separated from things we don't like too. But we're going to be separated from all these things that we spend our time and effort on. But then we remember another thing. And that is that we are the owners of our actions, right? We have power. the decisions we make today can affect our future, can affect our suffering, right? So even though we have all these things coming at us, age, illness, death, separation, all this stuff is happening, we're not helpless. We can look at these things, understand them, and understand why we suffer from them. So the Buddha wants us to learn how not to suffer, how, in fact, to be happy. Because that's what he was looking for, a happiness that would last. And he saw that everything that we do in the world, that sandwich is going to be gone. So you can't pin your happiness on the sandwich. You have to look for something else. And that something else is to be found inside in the human mind. Because the mind is the one thing we can control. We can't control the outside world very well. We can up to a point. Yeah, I can turn the light on and off, right? But I can't affect the fact that there is electricity, that someone, I mean, there's this whole history that puts us where we are. All the things we've done, all the choices we've made. I decided to get glasses that look like this. Therefore, I don't have glasses that look different. You have to make these decisions one way or another, but they're your decisions to make. So in the end of the day, you do have power over your mind. And you can't change what's coming at you very much, but you can change how your mind reacts to it. So I don't know. Does that kind of answer your question? The Buddha was basically looking to end suffering because he saw it and was freaked out by it.
Well, what I've noticed too is the Buddha, he teaches too, your mindset says if you set your mind for, what do you call it, you condition, the Buddha teaches like you teach your mind how to handle certain things, like the response of certain situations that does come up, okay? Where when a person antagonizes you, the Buddha teaches you how to handle that situation, where you calmly think before you respond to it, and knowing what to do and what to do is an important thing. And where when you know that you figure, okay, like your health, they say your mind helps the health of your body. If you keep your mind sharp and informed, other things helps as well too. Like a meditation. If you stop and think, you calmly, relieve the stress from your body. You calm down, try to keep a level head. And people don't stop to think about that. Okay. All right.
Very
and
true.
Huh?
Very true. Yeah.
And when it comes to, and what people don't, like with Buddha, when they see people, how you say, sick, okay, and they wish they can do what all they can do, and they know in their own mind that what they can do is best as they can do to help with anyone, helping another fellow person, health and peace of mind. They can be there to help them out in the long trips, health wise, mental, and physically, And you think too that when it comes to food, okay, that they would, if it was, it teaches like, there's ways of feeding people without starving to death or injuring people, It's like,
yes,
and people don't stop and think about that situation, there. And the Buddha too is when it comes to the peace of mind, they know when that time comes when they do pass away that they need to have what you call a peace of mind where they know from right from wrong. that their conscience is clear thinking for how they live their life, how they handle their life, and what goes on, what they can do themselves in their own area. Because if they can't do the simple, you would think that, okay, whatever does happen in their area, that if they can do something for whatever does happen, and if it's in their strength and their power, that they would do it. Because for to look and feel bad and feel bad for a person that's desperately sick or desperately hurt in any form or fashion, that would go against almost everything that they would believe in, of not harming a fellow person over something stupid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Well, you bring up a couple of very good points, and you're actually right on the money about things like you were saying at first about your mind. That gets right back to what I was saying about how your mind comes first. You have to calm your mind. In Buddhism, they call it equanimity. And that's so important because you can control your mind. It's not easy, as we all know, because as we're adults, we try to have self-control. We go into situations and we try to be civilized and control ourselves. And in Buddhism, it's very important to control the mind even more to get down to these feelings. What you were saying reminded me of something when I was talking with my friend Panyabasa. I've got the video clip somewhere, but basically he says if someone calls you like a bad name, and they do it to hurt you, then that's bad on them. They've done something wrong, and that's not good karma. That's going to make trouble for them later. But if you allow yourself to get upset, that's on you, because the idea is that no matter what he says, it's like the old saying, I am rubber, you are glue. Whatever you throw at me bounces off of me and sticks to you.
Yeah.
Right? You don't let their bad ideas, there's a saying like, an unpleasant sound has hit the ear. It doesn't have to go any further, because you realize that this person you're not that way. He's not telling the truth. And he's speaking out of his own rage and despair. Now, this is not easy to do, but like you're saying, and then like I said before, when we can keep ourselves cool and calm and don't let other people control us. Because if someone says something and gets you mad, he's controlling you, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
But if someone says something to you and you don't get mad, that usually sends them crazy. They hate that. And not that you're doing it for that, but it's like, why should you let someone else control your mind? And you made a good point about when you come to the end of life, it is very important in Buddhism to have a good mental attitude. And a big part of that is, like you say, you look back on your life and you realize you've done your best not to harm people. We have 5 precepts in Buddhism that a good Buddhist does their best to uphold, and that is, you don't kill people, you don't do harm, you don't steal, you don't lie, you do not cheat on your spouse or engage in any other irregularity, you don't, anything like that, and you don't drink alcohol. And by doing these things in Buddhism, we say you're offering protection to the people around you. See, in Theravada Buddhism, a lot of people say, well, you got to go out and help other people. In our Buddhism, we work on ourselves. But because and some people, that's greedy, you should be working on other people. No, we work on ourselves so that other people benefit. So if I don't kill or steal or lie or cheat or get drunk, I'm a lot better to be around. I would prefer to be around people that don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, that don't get drunk, that, don't do any of these things, right? So you're offering protection to the people around you. They don't have to worry about you. They can trust you. They can like you. And when you're around people like that, then you can feel the same way. And this makes things better. And when you look back over your life and you realize that you've been this way, then you can leave this world with a good mental attitude. And this is very important in Buddhism anyway, because in Buddhism, we have more than one birth. Not every religion has that, but in Buddhism, you are going to keep going. And where you go is going to depend not only on what you've done, but on your mental attitude toward what you've done. So what you said was right on the button. You want to be always in control of your mind. Don't let other people disturb your equanimity. And you want to be in Buddhism, they call it virtue, which we also call it in English. You want to be a virtuous person so that you're not disturbed. You're not lying on your deathbed saying, I was really mean to that person. I did this, I did that. And I don't know about you, but we're all older and we've all lost friends and relatives. And the one thing, whenever I have a friend or a relative pass on, one of the first things I always think of is that I wish I'd been nicer to them. I mean, I'm always nice to people and I try my best, but you start thinking, I always think in terms of like the good I could have done. And so I try to remember that. So when I go to visit my mom, who's in the nursing home right now, and she is doing better, which is good, but still she's very old. I try to spend as much time with her as I can, because I know I probably don't have much time left with her, and I want to do as much good as I can while I'm here. And that's really the key. You've got this human life, and we can do good with it. And when we do good with it, we are happier. And again, Buddhism is all about being happier. So you're right on the money.
Yeah, but like what you just said about you're fixing yourself. Well, but here's the thing: you're setting a certain thing out. You're recognizing that you need to fix yourself above everything else. But people that witnesses it, they're sitting there saying, if he can recognize himself, in what way is he fixing himself, and how does he notices it? And they sit and notice it about themselves by what you do as a person.
Yes.
And and a set of minds too, as a Buddhist. Like, okay, when people and I know this, but when people have said things, we call it where when your emotion gets hit by what they do say, it makes you think, okay, why am I feeling a certain way about that? And that's the thing that people do got to watch out for, because it's a dangerous thing, because people react in not a very good way when that situation appears.
Yeah.
And
that's a good point, because when someone says something to you, like you're talking about, says something that you don't like, you do have that reaction. Nobody likes to be, have unpleasant things said to them. I don't like it. It can be very upsetting, but you're right to be able to step back from it and say, why am I feeling this way? That's an important part. We need to step back from ourselves a little bit and look at what we're doing. And and you make a good point about that's really the best thing we can do for other people, is to try to give them a good example. Because if you just tell someone to do something, but you don't do it yourself, they're not going to be very impressed with it.
Yeah, and that's like being two-faced. You're saying that you believe in this, but then at the same time, you're not following the same thing within that in that religion, or that type of deal, the ideals of it.
Right. You've got to walk the walk as well as talk the talk, and it's a lot easier to talk than it is to walk.
Yeah.
And I do my best to walk the walk. I'm not always successful. None of us are, but you bring yourself back. Every time you stumble a little bit or slip, you just pick yourself right up and go again. In fact, a big part of the practice of Buddhism, especially when you're first getting started, is the normal state is you bring yourself back, you bring yourself back, you bring yourself back. Do it 100 times, 1,000 times, it doesn't matter. Your default is you bring yourself back, get back on the path, get back to virtue. And after a while, it sticks, and you do see a difference in the way people around you feel and behave. Because, like we were saying, you're offering protection to them by not doing bad things. You're being an example, and people start feeling better around you, I think, and people interact with you differently. You can see a difference. It's somebody once talked to me about he was worried about being misunderstood. People thought this of him or that, and I said, your actions will speak louder than your words. If they see you being a good person day after day, they will realize, they really will know. And people notice it, and it makes them happier. So, it's a path that even though you're working on yourself, yeah, it does help the people around you a lot.
Yeah.
True.
And I find, and like with different types of like there's like you stop and look and you look at other groups, okay, how they are, and certain things we call parallel to where one religion comes close to the other, and where people they listen to what one says and they learn from both, and but can they fully understand either side of it?
Well,
I mean,
there's always parallels. Yeah, but go on.
yeah, but can they?
What was that? Well, these parallels in religion. The first thing I think of is that all humans are basically the same all through history. I'm not going to talk about Julian James's theory of the bicameral mind or anything like that, but basically all human beings are facing the same issues. We've got the same body, right? We've got the same brain, the same heart and lungs. We have a lot of the same concerns, birth, life, marriage, reproduction, family, society. Every culture has these things. And so when wise men and wise women for that matter, but when wise people look at these problems, a lot of times they see the same thing and they come up with similar solutions. So you can read the Bible and read things that Jesus says, and some of them are very close to things that the Buddha said. They were not teaching the same thing at all, but you've got parallel ideas. And there's a story I remember when a Buddhist monk from Southeast Asia was visiting, I think it was England, and he didn't know much about the West. And one of his students who was traveling with him, they went to a hotel, and there was a Bible in the hotel. And this is the holy book of the land I'm living in. So one of his students who could read English read to him excerpts from the Bible, read to him the Sermon on the Mount. And the Buddhist teacher said, those are the words of a bodhisattva. Those are the words of someone who's on his way to becoming a Buddha. And it's always made me think that, because there will be another Buddha one day, according to Buddhist thought. And I wonder if they'll tell stories. Our current Buddha has there's something called the Jataka stories, right? These are stories of all his past lives. And I just wonder if the future Buddha, there will be a story of the time he was a teacher, in ancient Palestine, talking about, let's be nice to each other, let's love each other instead of like all this warfare and killing and stuff. So yeah, there's always these parallels, but I think it's important. I spent years just picking from this religion, from this, I've studied religions and occult philosophy and all this stuff. And I finally, when I looked at Buddhism, first of all, I saw that a lot of the stuff I'd been studying had basically been stolen from Buddhism or picked from Buddhism. And Buddhism is very old. It's 2,600 years old. So it's older than any of these other systems that we're picking from it. So when I started studying Buddhism seriously, and by that I mean, Theravada Buddhism, I suddenly saw that this was a complete system. So we were talking about how there's a lot of Buddhist techniques out there that are being taught, like what they call kind of inaccurately mindfulness meditation, where you just sit and all you think about is the present moment, and you don't care about the past or you don't care about the future. You're just here now. And so in theory, all your worries about the past and the future just go away, and you can just groove in this kind of eternal now thing. Well, that is helpful to make you feel better for a little while, but it doesn't really get you anywhere. Now, in Buddhism, they do have that technique, but it's part of a bigger system. And the idea in Buddhism is you focus on the present moment, right here and right now. The past, 5 minutes ago, 5 years ago, 5 seconds ago is not real. The future, 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 5 years from now, that's not real. All that's real is this moment, right? When you're in that moment, you've got work to do. Because if you can drop all your worries about the past and the future, you can concentrate your mind right now. And right now is when you make decisions. And every decision you make right now, every decision you make, every action you do is going to affect your future. And if we make these decisions while we're lost in our own heads thinking about that sandwich, we're not going to make good decisions, except we want to go out to the store and buy some mayonnaise and some sliced turkey or something to make a sandwich with, or whatever you like in your sandwich. So yeah, it's interesting to see these little different parallels. But I think you've got to really, with Buddhism anyway, it really is a complete system, and everything that the Buddha taught fits in with everything else. The Buddha was very autistic. I really think he was like the ultimate autist. To be a Buddha, Buddha is a technical term, right, in the Buddhist religion, and people get enlightened, and in the term used is arhat, right, where they wake up and they know what the Buddha knew, right? They call the Buddha because he can teach it. A lot of people wake up and they say, wow, how do I be enlightened? And you say something like, no matter where you are, man, there you are. No matter where you go, there. It's hard to put into words, but the Buddha, he was able to describe every step that his mind took to do this. And then he spent 45 years walking around northern India, answering questions about it and refining it. So at the end of the day, by the time he died, or passed into parinirvana, as they say, we had this complete system of how our mind works and how we can control our own mind. Because the mind's a dangerous thing. Mind's a powerful thing, and the most important thing you can do with your life, I think, is get your mind to work better. Because your mind is going to be what makes you miserable. Your mind is going to be what makes you happy. And your mind is going to determine how good your future is. Like I say, if you can be really aware and alert when you decide to do things. And I don't do this myself perfectly. I fall down all the time. When I'm conscious and alert and I can keep it together, I do real well. But sometimes you get caught up in the enthusiasm. Roger, you know about this too. You can be discussing something. You're supposed to stay on a certain topic, right? And suddenly you lose your focus. Suddenly, instead of being separate and like looking at all this stuff, you enter into a becoming. And suddenly you're arguing about like, where does gold come from? And this and that, and the other thing. And you completely lose track of what you're doing because I stop being mindful. And again, it's easy to slip back, but I have to climb back up. I have to climb back up on that horse after I'm thrown. What's the old line? Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again. And do it again and again and again, and not beat yourself up too much over, mistakes you've made, because that doesn't do any good. The Buddha said that if we make a mistake, if we do something, he said, before you do anything, you should consider whether it's going to do any harm or not. And then if it doesn't seem like it is, then you do it. And as you're doing it, you look, is it doing any harm? If you see that it is, you stop. If you see that it doesn't, you keep going. And then after you do it, you look at it and say, did I do any harm when I did that? And if you didn't, great. If you did, you say, I don't want to do that again. It's very good to discuss it perhaps with someone who's further along on the path, admit what you did, and then you resolve, I'm not going to repeat that. But if you just sit there and beat yourself up about it and wail and punish yourself, and we all tend to do this, and I do it too, it doesn't do you any good. The best we can do as humans, the best we can do as creatures living in time, because we can't go back, is to look at our mistakes and say, I'm not going to beat myself up over it, but I'm not going to do it again, and go forward. So,
Yeah. Well, and one other thing, it's what if the 10 things that mindset of what a Buddhist is? Okay, because to me,
mhm.
to say that you understand, you live the life, you there's certain things, 10 things a Buddhist should know, or what you call it, people would know that, okay, for to be a Buddhist, then what is a Buddhist? What 10 things the set mind of a Buddhist is, that to where you can actually say that you can fully understand who the world, the way they are, the way they handle things mentally, physically, and emotionally about a Buddhist. How does 10 things about a Buddhist, and people, that's the thing that can actually understand the whole idea of it. I don't not know, but that's the thing,
Well,
peace of mind of how they handle things, you know.
well, like I said, there's a lot of different kinds of Buddhism in the world,
Yeah.
and so different Buddhists have different ideas of what is required of them to be a good Buddhist. And then you have to remember that there's two levels of Buddhism. You have what they call, well, technically three. You've got um, the regular lay people, lay followers, like everyday Buddhists, but they go to work every day and they're just. Then you've got what they call the Sangha, which are the monks. It's actually bhikkhu, which means, I think, wanderer. They're not like Western monks, but that's a pretty good translation. So, and then you've got what they call the noble Sangha. And the noble Sangha are monks who have attained enlightenment. They're arhants. They're basically on the same level as the Buddha mentally. They just don't teach. To teach, that makes you a Buddha. So each group has its own responsibilities and things it has to do. Although the Sangha and the Noble Sangha are pretty much seamless, because you never know. You're not supposed to tell people if you become enlightened, if you're a monk. You're not supposed to discuss it. So when you meet a Buddhist monk, you never know. Maybe he's enlightened, maybe not. They don't talk about it. That's a private, very private thing.
Yeah.
But if you're a lay follower, just like a normal guy like me, your main thing is you follow the precepts.
What's the
You
precept?
try to incorporate the precepts are that I will refrain from causing harm, especially killing. That I will not lie. I will not tell a lie. I will not steal. I will not. The phrase is, I will not take what is not offered. I will not engage in sexual irregularities. Or they say illicit sex. And the actual words were, you will not seduce married women. You will not seduce women who are under the protection of their parents, in other words, minors. So you do not break up marriages. You don't break up your own marriage or anyone else's. You don't go after children. Says nothing at all about consenting adults. You can have a girlfriend, whatever. That's not a problem. Sex isn't a problem in Buddhism. It's sex that harms people, right? And
Yeah.
I don't drink alcohol,
Okay.
which the main rule against alcohol is because alcohol clouds the mind, and we're trying to make our minds work better. And when you drink alcohol, it makes you very stupid.
Yeah.
And it ruins your judgment. And I think we've all had experience with that. And that gets back to that craving and clinging, because you crave that drink and you cling to the idea of a drink. And then when you get that bottle, you cling to the bottle and you're getting this pleasure. And then the next day, you're throwing up, you're sick, your knuckles might be all red where you got into a fight and you don't even remember it. the police might be knocking at your door, and suddenly, so the Buddha said that wisdom consists in looking at any action and asking yourself whether this is good for you in the long term. He's all about thinking in the long term. Short term, yeah, drink that bottle of whiskey. Long term, this is killing you.
But
Why would you do this?
could that be followed at the same time too, as okay, like your mind? Okay, if it can create a thing of damaging your mind, the things that you or another person's going to do could create a problem where their mind's going to be hurt from it bad enough that other people can get affected by it as well too.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing.
Yeah, well, the mind is central, and when Buddha is all about action, right? So in Buddhism, you're not bad, but you can perform actions that are bad.
Yeah.
So if you say you're bad, you can't change yourself because you're you.
Yeah.
But if you say I'm behaving badly, you can change your behavior. And behavior, actions includes your thoughts, right? Because thinking is an action, and your thoughts are going to determine what you physically do in the world.
And emotionally.
And emotions are also part of thoughts. That's interesting. That's an interesting thing to bring up because, our thoughts, we often think I have to think this person said that, so now I have to get mad. Like, we don't have a choice. But Buddhism shows us that we do have a choice. We don't have to follow that thought. We can say, I know where that thought is going to go. That thought's going to make me feel miserable. I can think this thought, oh, nobody loves me, everybody hates me, I'm going to eat some worms, right? Because somebody said something I don't like. But I've done this to myself before. I know that I'm just going to go into a miserable funk and I'm going to cry or this or that, and then I'll get over it. So in Buddhism, let's skip a step. Let's not go down that path because we know it just goes to the same place again and again and again. And of course, however you think is going to affect you and your actions and everyone around you too. It gets back to that, giving other people protection from you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
And I was curious too, because it's the thing that, okay, when people don't fully understand the thing of what, okay, when the way when you feel a certain way and all that, okay, and you step back because you don't like where, if you know how you get as a person, okay, and people take it like an insult because they're thinking that you're being disrespectful because you're keeping your distance from them. They don't understand that it's not from you. He's keeping the distance away from you to keep you from it could turn bad for you or him. In either case, it doesn't work out for either side if you permit that motion to arise. Really bad emotion. It's like a person that you have certain things for. You know how you feel about that. To how that's not a good thing. So instead of being honest and telling, they always say, tell the person the truth. Well, in some cases, it's best not to say the truth because the truth might hurt worse or can create more of a bigger problem than anything else. And it's best to walk off from that situation completely.
Yes, very much so. Well, when I talk about in Buddhism, you have to tell the truth, right?
Yeah.
That's a very important rule. However, the Buddha was not naive. He was not naive. He understood how the world works. So in Buddhism, when we talk about telling the truth, the Buddha said, before you say anything, there's 3 things you should think about before you tell somebody something. First of all, is it true? Because you should only speak the truth. So, okay, I can say something to this person because it's true. However, is this truth going to be helpful at that time? It might not be the right time to say this truth. And you also have to ask yourself, is telling the truth at this time going to be beneficial? Is it going to help things? Sometimes no. Sometimes it's not a time to tell somebody some home truths. Sometimes you have to let them calm down before you can talk to them. So in Buddhism, if you are in a situation where the truth would hurt things, make things worse, you don't say anything at all. You wait until it's the right time to say it, right? And then even then you might not say it. So you refrain from telling the truth. There was a thing where the example given was say you're in East Germany, right? And the Stasi are like going door to door looking for bourgeoisie class traitors to take to interrogate. And you've got some guys hiding, and here comes the communist police, and they pound on the door. It says, "Are you hiding any bourgeois?" And you're a Buddhist. What do you say? You say, "Oh yeah, they're up in the attic." Well, they're going to be dragged off and tortured, right? So you might say something like, "Me? Would I be hiding the bourgeois? How could I be doing something like that?" You can kind of, you're not lying. You're just asking a question. But you could tell the truth, but it would not be timely or beneficial. It wouldn't help anyone.
Yeah, but you could say somewhat of a half of truth.
Good.
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen, but I have seen, maybe a few days ago, down the road.
You could, but the trouble, even with half truths, are they can trip you up.
Yeah.
One of the great, and I'm sure you've noticed this, one of the great things about being truthful is when you're truthful, you don't have to remember your stories.
Well, in a way, yeah, you do, because even when you do say the truth, it can come back and someone can try to manipulate the situation to turn it.
Oh yeah, but then you just stick to the truth,
Well, yeah.
I think is the best way. I think it's the less you say, the better. You want to keep it simple. If you think you can get away with something, but even then, a half truth still isn't a truth. As a Buddhist, you should try to find some way around it.
Yeah.
And so you do your best anyway.
But when you do talk to, like we were saying about a person's mental health, it's just not that, but it's at the point in time too. When the time does come, you stop and look and you figure, okay, if this person, this person's ready at this point in time, yes or no. If that person was to come up to you and ask you that simple question, would you be able to handle that at this present time of that question that person's asking you, whatever that question would be? Would that person be able to handle that situation right then and there?
Right.
With all of it.
Right. You've got to be able to judge that. And that's easier to do with people we know because we know them. I have a friend of mine who, he's a really, really good man, good guy. He can get upset easily. And then he gets unupset. That you ever hear the saying, somebody who's quick to anger, but then he's quick to forgive. And that's how this guy is. So if something's upsetting him, you can't talk to him about certain things at that time. But the next day, when he's calmed down and he's thought it out himself, he says, well, maybe I got, da, 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 da. And then you can kind of say, yeah, this, that. Then you kind of tell him the stuff that he really wasn't ready to hear. It's always important. You can only tell people what they're ready to hear. And it's very easy. Yeah. And they're ready to face you've got to have some good judgment about that. Because if you try to talk to someone and they're not ready to hear you, well, they're just not going to hear you. And this is all about communication. If you want to talk to someone, it's more than just using the right words. You've got to use them at the right time when the person can hear. So yeah, yeah, you should tell the truth, but you don't always get right in someone's face and say, "Oh yeah, well this is the truth." Then you're using the truth to hurt someone, and then
Yeah.
that's not good because it's all
Or
about not harming people.
yep. Or you're trying to manipulate the situation for your own personal use.
Right,
And
right.
manipulation is what you call it, like a three-way street. You know, you got three things that manipulation is going to bring out people. You know, anger, where they're getting what you call it, where they want to tear you apart. You know, three different types of things that anger manipulation brings out of people,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's dangerous. That whole thing is,
Oh yeah.
and
Well, there's an old saying. I heard there's two sayings. One was, if you're going to tell people the truth, you better make it funny and get them to laugh, because otherwise they'll kill you.
yep,
And the other saying was, if you're going to tell someone the truth, have one foot in the stirrup. In other words, be ready to jump right on your horse and ride the heck out of there.
uh,
But that's when you're telling the truth at the wrong time, you
well,
know,
and to the wrong person,
and to the wrong person. Right, exactly.
because
So, yeah, you got to
and,
be careful.
yeah, and if you're going to have a horse, you better make sure that horse is able to run pretty good.
Mm-hmm. That's
Because
right.
depends on that person, you go and say whatever.
Yeah.
You the whole thing of that person's set of mind at that point in time, and what it is. You know, they're we call it. You never know the set of mind of whatever that is that person whatever you're going to say that could really set the person off even 10 times worse than anything else.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's the thing people don't stop and think about. Better be thinking of what you're going to say, and too, it's how you phrase when you say it too.
Mm-hmm.
When you walk up and when your tone of voice disrespects of what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't help. It's all in the way you phrase it. You know, I mean, like monks. Monks would know that. You know, you go troublemaker comes up to him. He knows that if he doesn't want no problems with this person, he has to keep a level tone voice, nothing
Mm-hmm.
rude, nothing where it's going to create a problem, but calmly say, sorry, no, but calmly, you
Yes.
know, and people don't stop and think about that.
And when you can stay calm outside, it helps you stay calm inside, and vice versa. When you're calm inside, it helps you stay calm outside. And you
Yep,
always do better with calm. You always
yep.
do better when you can be. They call that equanimity in Buddhism. Well, all kinds of special terms in Buddhism, but they're just regular things we do. You know,
It,
because like you're saying about keeping calm and everything, that has to do with the way you think about things, right? And you can look at
mm-hmm,
this and you can approach it and either let someone get under your skin, and then like I was saying before, then they control you, and suddenly they're in charge, and you're losing. The Buddha used to say, if your enemy says something to get you angry and you get angry, think of how happy that makes your enemy, right?
yep.
So yeah, very very much so. And if you're um able to maintain that, you've got a huge advantage. And again, you're less miserable. You have more happiness. You're not getting pulled into somebody else's unhappiness, because when people insult you or do these things, they're not happy. They're miserable. They're talking out of their own misery. What kind of a person has to go and say and do things like that, right? Somebody who's pretty bloody miserable inside. You kind of got to feel sorry for them if you think about it. But it's
Well,
important, like you were saying, to be able to step back and see that. So that's good. That's good, Robert.
yeah. And it's like them three uh, places in India.
We're
Monks,
talking about
three
that.
different types of monks live one another, close to one another. The schools and all that was right there. They work to it. They live together. Well, but as you said, they teach their own thing. But they lived in close areas. They live with each other, not to have conflict where they do not compete, saying mine is better than yours or anything like that. It's
Right.
that they respected enough of it to where you teach what the way, to understand the full thing is more mature than what most people are. Because if you got three different types of religion as a monk, you have to understand all three of them to understand that. Look at the process, how they live, the food, how everything works. Okay, if they can live like that with no problem, okay, no fights, none of it. Why is it that people can't follow the same route as they did? All three of the monks in India during World War II. That was during that specific time when the place was built. Well, they lived there, and
Well, well, it's interesting because in a lot of these countries, there are more traditions than we have of just, living and let live. I mean, if you go to India, you know, it's somebody pointed this out to me. You've heard of Hinduism, right? Hinduism, the
yeah,
Hindu religion. There's actually no such thing. Hinduism as a word was invented in 1814 by anthropologists because they were
huh,
trying to describe how all the different Indian religions, they have hundreds of gods and each person worships their own god. They're really all separate religions, but they all get along and they accept each
yeah,
other's religions. And then the English came along and said, look at all these guys. They don't hate each other. This must be just one religion. And they do share a lot of mythology, but so to Jews and Christians and Muslims in the West. They all have very similar ideas about religion. They have a lot of, Christianity came out of Judaism and Islam came out of Christianity and Judaism combined. So they've got a lot of common elements, right? But they fight like cats and dogs. But
yeah.
over
But
in India, you can have 100 different gods and they're not fighting each other. So it's kind of interesting how you can have people like you're saying, you could have three different kinds of monks or three different and this is something before I forget, this just came out in Vietnam. They have a new Catholic saint now. And perhaps Tan will talk about it on the show next time that he's on. And one of the things he posted an article in Minds, which you can check out. And one of the things they noticed, I thought it was interesting. I posted it in the Buddhist Discord, where even Buddhists were attending his funeral they were attending his ceremony to become a saint. I think they call it beatification. And that Buddhists and even like, as I said, people with no particular religion, probably like animists and stuff like that, were paying homage to him. So in Southeast Asia, just because I'm a Buddhist or an animist doesn't mean I can't go to a Catholic saint and pray to him
yeah,
as well. They don't see any problem with that. Now, the Catholic, I'm sure, would have a problem with going and going to a Buddhist shrine to make an offering, but the Buddhist and the animist don't see any problem. So you do have that. That's I think a good tradition for us to pursue. We need to learn to live together better
well,
and
yeah,
not worry about the other person's religion that much. Let them have it.
but here's the thing: it takes more than that because you look at all these places with different types of religion, and they can't grasp at the ideal that okay, if our if, if what we're doing is harming other people, can they say that our religion, if our how is it that they can't realize what their religion's causing other religions, when they're losing people and they're saying their religion's more important than theirs, that's not good because that just creates more of a bigger problem.
Yeah. Well, that's the
Okay.
thing. That's the thing because religions used to be very. I was just reading a thing about the ancient Romans, and they had so many gods, and they were always importing new gods. I mean, they would just invite them into the city and build temples to them and stuff because they liked having lots of gods. But then you get this religious idea, like you're saying, my religion's better. I saw this wonderful documentary about the religious wars they were having in Europe, up in the Netherlands, and it was like basically the Catholics versus the Protestants. And up in the Netherlands, it was awful because when the Catholics came to power, they just burned any Protestant they could get a hold of. And when the Protestants came into power, guess what they did? They started burning Catholics. It was just, and I mean, they both worship God. They're both Christians, right? They both have Jesus and all these same teachings about, don't hurt people, peace, the Prince of Peace, and they're torturing people. So this is really weird when you look at like most of history. I mean, that's not to say there weren't like religious arguments. The first real big, I think I posted it in the Discord again. I post a lot in the Discord. There was this emperor called Diocletian, right? And he wanted to make Rome great again because Rome wasn't going well. And he said, you know what? We got too many foreign religions. So we're going to stamp out these foreign religions. And I mean, stamp them out. So he was the one that started persecuting not just Christians, but Monarchians and some other religions that just were not the traditional. He says, we're doing wrong because we've left our traditions. We've got to get rid of all this stuff that's like, corrupting us. That was a whole new thing in the West. And I don't know where he got the idea from. It'd be interesting to look at.
Well,
But,
no,
up till then, you could have whatever religion you wanted. Nobody cared.
yeah.
And
But
why
that's
not?
the,
As long as you're not hurting other people, like you're saying, you don't want your religion to say, well, my religion says I have to chop your head off if you don't convert. Like, no, that's not, we don't have that religion.
Yeah.
You've got
and one other thing too, and like what you were just saying about, well, it's the thing that when it goes to the point where it's my way or the highway on what you just said, and people don't fully understand the full thing of what that person's meaning, the full
Right.
thing of, and if neither sides are willing to work out on either side, how can you really say it's being fully understood?
Right. Good point. Hmm. And it's so difficult for people to understand each other, and because we have all these preconceptions. Again, the mind comes first. We say in Buddhism, everything's filtered through your own ideas about things. A lot of the time, like we were talking, like anger. Anger is not a good thing. When the Buddha was asked if there was anything you would kill, what would it be? And he said, anger. The only thing you should kill is anger, because anger makes us very stupid. Anger makes us, it's insane. Anger is like a bubble that you're
Just
trapped.
not anger. Just not anger that it is the thing. It's the thing that it's where one thing that's where when you feel in love with someone, that's one thing. But when it goes way beyond that, as what we call it, like territorial love, best way I
Yeah.
can put it, it's where that goes right out the window. That serves no purpose in life or any in any kind of thing.
Right.
It serves no real purpose in anything.
Yeah.
Because when a group starts acting in that way,
Yeah.
it's a bad thing.
It is. It is. And we want good things. And that's why we follow our precepts. We don't lie, cheat, steal, drink. We certainly don't kill. When I work where I work, I have to roll up the canvas on this thing every day, and I always make sure the little spiders escape. They laugh at me at work. There's like a worm on the path. I run out and get it and put it on a tree so nobody steps on it. Because I need all the good karma I can get. We didn't talk about karma. There's a million things to talk about in Buddhism, and I just kind of gave a kind of a confused overview. I really should try to come up with some sort of a plan, but it's such a big topic, and there are so many aspects to it. But it is 21 after 8. I was thinking we should probably wind things down pretty soon. We don't want this to be too long, especially since we can do other shows, and maybe we can follow up some of these ideas.
Okay.
But if we try to cover too much today, we might lose viewers. I wonder if we have any viewers. Roger, do we have anyone mentioning it, chatting with us or
We
watching us or anything like that?
we had Veterans Radio on Kick who stopped in. He just gave his regular emojis, but he didn't say anything. I did a shout out saying hello to Veterans Radio and thanks for stopping in. So we
Thank
did
you.
have,
We do appreciate it. We do appreciate it. Yeah, yeah.
we had
So,
we had 3 views on YouTube, and we've had 2 views on Rumble, and
nice.
on Kick we've had between 1 and 2. It bounces up and down. So,
Gentlemen, we are reaching them. We're reaching them. People are going to learn about Buddhism through this. This is really good.
Yeah, just one thing, we can bring it up on later. Next one I would like to find out is, okay, how does Buddha, I can't pronounce it correctly.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry about it.
I can't pronounce a lot of these words too. It's a foreign language, but
I want to find out about Buddhism and how does how how does it work within, like, in different countries, like Russia or Japan, their ideals, their beliefs.
Okay, yeah,
One.
that would be a great talk. Because as I was saying, there's a lot of different things out there called Buddhism. I'll just say offhand that there's 2 main branches that are around today. In the ancient world, there were a lot of different Buddhist schools, but today we have what they call the Theravada Buddhists. And Theravada is a word that means the way of the older people, the elders, the old school, if you like. And then they have what they call the Mahayana. And Mahayana means big vehicle, big boat. In other words, like a big tent. The Democrats, we need a big tent. And in Mahayana, the big tent, you've got another kind of Buddhism called Vajrayana. And Vajrayana means diamond thunderbolt, right? And that's part of Tibetan Buddhism. And Vajrayana Buddhism is a subset of Tibetan Mahayana Buddhism, and it has to do with what they call quick ascent or steep ascent. Basically, how to be a Buddha in one lifetime. Cut through all this stuff. It's a very difficult path, and it's arguably not anything that the Buddha taught. Well, we can get into the details about that, but all of these spring from ultimately the Buddha's teachings, but a lot of it had to do with the way Buddhism traveled. But it would be another hour and a half to go on about this. But that's a great topic, Robert. We'll talk about that next time. I think that would be wonderful.
Okay.
All right. So, Roger, do you want to ask us all for our socials, or should I do that, or how are we handling this, bud?
you can go ahead if you want to, since it's a joint effort. So,
all right. Well, thanks everyone for being part of our show today. Hope you found it enlightening, or at least entertaining. I think we all had a really good time, and I'm looking forward to continuing the discussion next week. But we're going to take our leave for now. But before we go, we're going to share our socials, as it were, in case you want to contact any of us with any questions. So, Roger, why don't you give the socials for you and Robert, the brothers Hanson?
all right, you can find me and Robert on Minds at Roger_Hanson. You can also find us in our Minds group, which is called Strange Stories, as well as the Praetorian on Minds.com. Now, other than that, I am on X, Roger Hanson at ROGLOL1973. I'm also on Discord at The Wonderful World of Weirdness. You can find me on Teams and Element Matrix at Roger's Hangout. I believe that's all of it, Otto. There could be more.
That's plenty. You're all over the place. As far as I go, you can check out my website, navakavada.org. That's NAVAKAVADA. It's spelled just like it sounds. I'm also on minds.com, Otto_X. I also have Navakavada channel on YouTube, which has some interesting videos. Also, Navakavada Buddhism on BitChute, some older videos, but I think some very interesting ones, including some very, very interesting long interviews with some Buddhist characters. I'm also to be found sometimes at Roger's Hangout on Teams, and a lot of the places where Roger is, and of course, Messenger Pigeon will sometimes find me. So, thanks again, everyone, especially those of you who commented. Please like, subscribe. Any comment you'd like to make, we do answer all comments as long as they're tasteful and within the bounds of the YouTube terms of service. So that being said, I'm looking forward to our talk next week. Robert, Roger, it was been great working with you gentlemen. And hopefully we'll see you guys and all of our audience next week.